Yeah, we're here, Brett. We have some very special people that we're talking to right now.
We really do.
I have like butterflies. I'm so nervous. Are you okay? You doing good?
I'm okay.
Today we have John and Ron, and you might know them from their Know Direction podcast, or a lot of the APs that Ron has written, or they're just adventurers themselves within the Paizo and D&D universe. Ron, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, just so our audience gets connected?
Oh, sure. I am a managing developer at Paizo. Well, my team and I are responsible for the Pathfinder Adventure Paths and the Pathfinder Lost Omens line, which is sort of our lore-heavy stuff that people have really liked, and working hard to make sure those things kind of go together, right? Make sure that we've got really engaging worlds and we're telling really engaging adventures in them. I've been at Paizo for almost 5 years now. Before then, I spent many years as a freelancer for Paizo, written a ton of adventures, rules stuff for them. Adventures is actually my favorite. That's where I like being involved. I've written a ton of adventures for a lot of other different systems, Dungeons and Dragons, and Torg, and just kind of all over the place. Anybody will let me write an adventure, I'll write an adventure for them. But it's been an awful lot of fun. I've been playing in a couple of games, including a couple of very fun Starfinder games, which is how John and I met.
Yeah, so I have not been around Pathfinder and Starfinder near as long as Ron has. I'm a longtime gamer from back in the 70s when I started with D&D, but more recently picked up Starfinder. We picked up Ron before he started with Paizo. We got him to join a Dead Sons group that we had started, and we were short players. That kind of got us started.
Days before I started Paizo. Yeah. I already moved to the city to start the job. I just haven't started it yet.
That was kind of really cool. Nice coincidence. I posted at a local game club that we were looking for players, and he saw it and called me up literally while we were at a game. And I said, "Hey, if you can show up now, you can play." And he said, "Oh, no, maybe next time. Maybe next time." But I GM a lot of organized play, so I'm one of, I think, 5 Nova GMs in the world for Starfinder organized play. So I've run
I saw that.
180, 190 tables of Starfinder for that. I do freelance writing for Paizo and other companies as well, Starfinder, and now I've been branching into Pathfinder 2nd edition. And we have 3 podcasts that we do. One of them is Intrepid Heroes, which is our actual play, where we just finished up the Dawn of Flame adventure path, and we are starting now, it'll be 2 weeks, our Devastation Arc adventure path. We'll be starting with Ron as the GM for that, and we added Eleanor Farron, who is another developer, to our group. We have Digital Divination, where Ron and I talk about Starfinder stuff, just whatever we feel like talking about. And then I have another podcast called Presenting, where I interview people in the gaming industry, where, Spencer, I'd like to get you on that sometime. And our more recent thing that we're looking at, we're actually starting a YouTube channel called Gaming Divination, where we'll talk about D20 things in general. So that's kind of, I'm on the production side of things. Ron's the talent.
I love it. So you guys are up to a lot. It's, and you have a day job, right, John? Aren't you in law enforcement?
I'm a university professor. I actually teach business.
That's right.
I did law enforcement and ice breaking and stuff like that in a former life. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations on all that. And thank you for chatting with us.
Sure.
As the audience knows, GM Macleods always has his rules guide, and that, there's the rules guide. It's on a shirt. you just can't
shirt. Exactly.
miss who. And the reason why we have a rules guide is so that production goes along smoothly and flawlessly. And, our shows are knitted very tight with editing and post-production. And we, Peter Atkinson has claimed that, we have some of the best, real play stuff, because we don't do it live. We send it through post, And so an important key to that is having Brett answering some or looking up some rules that may not be on the tip of your mind. And so that's what we want to talk to you about today. Was we have played Dead Sons. I know it's Jim Butler's favorite. And so we had a couple questions for you about some of the rules and how to make it the experience as a podcast maybe more, listenable. So that's really our inquiry is how do we get rules to participate. So one of the things that we do with Pathfinder 1 and 2 is I'd like to take 4 or 5 initiative rolls before we actually even start playing, so that I know what's going to happen beforehand, and I may throw a roll in for myself at the time, depending if they're beating up my monsters too quickly, and I add one. I never do that, right, Brett? Never.
No, never.
Sometimes. Okay. And so I'll do things like that. Let's talk about initiative in Starfinder. Is there some way that we can kind of nip it so that it's a quick executed thing? What would you guys recommend in that area?
Wow. Yeah. So to speed it up, what platform are you using? I saw you're using a VTT, but I couldn't quite tell from the video.
Yeah, we use Astral. Okay. I think we're going to migrate away because they actually broke down on our last. We just got done doing a Star Wars campaign called Not Another New Hope, and by the way, it is. The talent in that alone is phenomenal. It was okay for that, and then on our final session, it just wasn't working. Like they had a notice, so we have to move away from it, unfortunately, because I really enjoyed John Irons and the team. And
well, do you know what platform you're going to use? Because some of the platforms actually will auto roll for everybody. So if you're using Fantasy Grounds Unity, it'll auto roll for everybody if you want. So that makes it really quick. Now, I don't like Fantasy Grounds Unity. We played through that part of our Dead Suns campaign and actually ran Dead Suns as well on it, and it's a little clunky. A lot of people use Roll20 for the players to build their characters, and then the mechanics of how you actually run things. It's got everything, so Paizo's already offered up like all their, any APs that they have, everything's already built in, all the monsters, creatures, encounters, everything's built in. But how you actually activate them and use them, you have to have a lot of practice with it to get it down. And I never quite liked it. I spent $500 of my own money to buy everything that Paizo had for it, and I hated it so much that 30 days I returned it all with their turnback. So
and then we found it from the player perspective. I found it was really kind of a memory hog. I don't have top of the line computers, but the fact that it was just lagging really badly and on top of the clunky interface, it certainly wasn't my favorite.
That platform has auto rolls.
So what do you recommend? Is it rolled?
Well, we run a lot on Roll20, and that's pretty simplistic, but it doesn't have auto rolls. It's pretty easy to do. I actually like Foundry a lot, and there's quite a bit of community support for Starfinder on Foundry. From a GM's perspective, setting it up is pretty straightforward, but from a player's perspective, it's all drag and drop feats and abilities onto your character sheet, and it populates it and tells you what you can do and has all the roles, everything set up. So it makes it's a lot simpler to set up, and it's still like a click and go kind of thing. And setting up an encounter is pretty straightforward. It's click one button, and each player rolls their own initiative, and it shows up right there. So it's like, okay, everybody roll for initiative. Well, you'll start the combat. Everyone will roll for initiative. It takes like 10 seconds, and they're all populated.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Well,
yeah, we're running on Roll20, and it's the same type of thing. Each person has to do their own roll. You do GM has to do roll for the monsters. I think that there is a learning curve. I mean, and part of the reason that we do Roll20 is just because we all know it. We've been using it. The barrier of entry of learning another system is sometimes a little bit intimidating, but certainly seems to be worth it with Foundry. The initial looks that I've done at Foundry has been great, and we had a player just the other day kind of gripe a little bit when we got a bunch of treasure. He's like, "Oh, this is so much easier in Foundry, where you can just kind of literally drag it from the treasure chest onto your character sheet. It puts it on your character sheet, you click equip, and then suddenly you've got it. You don't need to worry about how much you've sold it for or what it does. I mean, just drag, click, and there it is."
Wow, that's cool. Brett, that'd make your job a lot easier, tracking treasure.
It certainly would.
It would.
I have a question about really just going to the core rulebooks, really. I mean, last time we played Starfinder was the first year we released, and to be honest, we haven't played it as much since. I'm a little, I got to brush off the cobwebs of Starfinder a little bit, but as far as the balance of the system itself, is it pretty well balanced, would you say, when it comes to the classes and everything? Because we're going to be probably bringing in 4 or 5 new people that probably never played Starfinder before. We just want to make sure their experience is fun and great, and everyone plays their part in the campaign. Maybe, if certain classes you think are overpowered or underpowered.
Oh, can I go first?
I
We both have thoughts on this. We've talked about this before. Yes, I'm going to say operative, and the reason that I'm going to say operative is that it's a very single target damage focused skill heavy class. Single target damage focused skill heavy class. It's sort of the best of rogues in Pathfinder edition, so much so that they can really fairly quickly overshadow other characters. They get such good skill bonuses and they get such good single target damage bonuses that a lot of people are kind of struggling to keep up with an operative.
Yeah, early on especially.
John has some mitigating input on that.
Early on, with the operative, in terms of skill ability in kind of combat power, is really, really strong. As we've seen in later games, it does, higher levels, it does balance out. So I'd say above level 10, then you're really seeing in terms of sheer power, a soldier and a Solarian do a lot of damage, a lot more damage actually than the operative would. But operatives, even at, like, we've done some playtesting at 18th level with I did with the operative in one of the campaigns that books he wrote, and basically you have max skills on everything but one, and so I maxed everything but mysticism just so our mystic had something to do. So if you want everybody to be able to participate and not be overshadowed, I would maybe lean away from having an operative, even though it's a really cool thing to have.
That's really great advice. Yeah, we like to play people, like the characters are really good at one thing and the other characters are not good at that thing. So
I was going to say, one of the things to keep in mind when you're doing sort of a class build is when it comes to being sort of the typical healer type that you might have. Well, I'm going to play cleric, so I'm going to be the healer type. That's not often the mystic. The mystic is the one that gets the divine kind of spells, but because the way Starfinder works, where you've got stamina points that your damage comes off of first, and then your hit points when you're sort of seriously harmed, the fact that the mystic's primary healing spells are ones that heal hit points but not stamina has a lot of people looking towards envoys, biohacker, some of the other classes to be sort of the mid-combat healing. Oh, my stamina is starting to get low. Oh, you can restore my stamina. It's not the mystic that's doing that. The mystic is the one to go to if you're really hurt.
You bring up hit points, and I had an interesting question. Back in the 70s when E1 was the rage, you had to roll for everything. I think I even remember, like, didn't you have to have different experience levels to go up a level? Like, I remember my wizard wouldn't go up like a thief did, and like, anyway, it was more, it was crunchier, right, back then, and I love that part. And so, just assigning hit points from your class and your race is that right? How you assign?
Yeah, Ron
hit
and I were
points?
just
Give me if I'm
talking
wrong.
about that today, and I was telling them, I remember when we had to roll dice, and if you're a wizard and you get a D4 and you get a 1. Say 1 hit point.
Yeah, I did it all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I had a wizard had 3 hit points, level 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awful. And it was the best fun I ever had playing,
Well, but then no matter how high a level you get, you're always going to have very few. The thing about rolling hit points, I think the reason that the game industry has moved away from it, and I don't want to get too deep into analytics of the game industry or whatever, but it's one of those situations where if you roll well for hit points, you kind of don't care. Later, I mean, you're durable, but you're not more durable than the fighter or anything. You hardly notice that you've rolled well. But when you roll poorly, that is going to stick with you your character's entire career, and it's going to kind of bring down the whole experience for your character's entire career. So any game mechanic where if you do badly, it carries on, and if you do well, it kind of doesn't, that's not an ideal game mechanic. I think that's why a lot of games have moved towards static numbers for your hit points and your stamina points.
I play in a campaign, and I DM a ton, and as a DM, I always let ones re-rolled. Now, as a player, I don't get that luxury with the other DM, the cruel DM, we'll call him. So I think you can create things like that at your table to make it fun and competitive and, give you an advantage. I mean, I always try and take a toughness feat already to add some hit points, even if I'm a wizard, So, yeah, very cool. And so is there any way, let's say, Brett and I were talking about this, let's say you get 6 hit points, your level, you get 6. What if we just said, hey, the average is 6, roll a d12?
Oh, so just to get some variance
for your hit points. So you could actually have a lot more than your level supplies, or you could have a lot less. I mean, I love the competitive nature of dice and like being at the table. Actually, when Peter Atkinson was playing with us, he said, "Oh, you guys have a critical chart," and we're like, "Oh yeah, we got a good critical chart." So some of these old mechanics, we love having them on board. Would that totally throw this game off if we said, "Hey, okay, so let's say you get 6, let's roll a d10." And
I think
average would be 5,
if you did that
right?
with hit points, but left stamina the same, so stamina gets affected by your Constitution modifier as well, And so I think what that would allow people to do is most campaigns that I've been in, and we don't get a lot of people down into hit points a whole ton, right? Do a lot of work and stamina. When you're really in trouble, you're getting into hit points usually, especially lower levels, right? But if you had that variance there, then that puts a lot of pressure on the people that didn't roll so well to maybe be a bit more careful with their stamina, because that's their buffer to this really tiny little hit point pool they have.
Well, and it allows for some good character roleplay, right? Somebody who has rolled very well for that. And I guess I probably would move the bounds in a little bit. Instead of D12 to get an average of 6, I would say maybe D6 plus 3, something like that.
Okay. Oh, that's a good way to put it.
That way your minimum is not so bad, but your maximum is not so big.
Right.
But if it varies a lot, then as John says, when people start running out of stamina, right? This is in a cinematic way, right? It's more than just bruises. You're starting to get the cuts and you've got the kind of characters who are like, it's all right, I'm going to keep on fighting. I got plenty of hit points.
Yeah, exactly. With the rules of Starfinder, obviously we know this dying rules actually obviously changed from Pathfinder 1 to Starfinder and obviously Pathfinder 2. Just curious what your thoughts are on the dying rules. If we were to tweak them to make them more Pathfinder 1, for example, you zero, you bleed to death instead. Would that really mess up the balance of the game or not? What are your thoughts on that?
I've been playing quite a bit of Pathfinder 2nd Edition lately. I kind of like the 2nd Edition rules, where you get a dying condition and you have to do a D20, a flat D20 check to see if you're continuing down that track. And
three times you fail, 3 times succeed.
And then when you recover, then there's still like this wound condition. So I really like that compared to, I've only ever killed like one player. Well, except for a scenario where everybody dies intentionally. I've only ever really killed one player. And so
just so you know, we have a show called TPK. So we'll be at Gen Con in two sessions of it. The whole point is to die.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah. We do get criticized a lot for that. Now, the thing about death in a game is, and I experienced this as a player a lot, and I enjoy it because it brings true drama to the table. And then all of a sudden you have to deal with, how are we going to get this guy resurrected? I mean, we are level 5 and we pull together our cash. Now we got to go beg some hag. Like, it's like, oh man. So I really like the drama, especially for a podcast, for when people are watching, like it's the best drama. So to be saved on death throws or like Pathfinder 2 or Starfinder, it gets a little light. Whereas you could really experience some drama if somebody screws up so bad they're on the floor. And so how could we tweak the game for that?
You need less hit points then, for sure.
That's true, and not just rolling for them, but and I would go the other direction. I would say you probably need less stamina points to be getting into the hit points sooner, so your characters feel a little less like superheroes who can kind of shrug off a bunch of stuff and take a 10-minute rest and keep right on going. But they end up having to pull on whatever healing they've got for hit points. I mean, this is the place where the Mystic does come into play a little bit more often. Because it's a lot more dangerous.
Well, one way so we experienced this in Dawn of Flame at the end. So Jason Tondro, the author of the last book of that, ran us through it. He's a former developer at Paizo, now at Wizards of the Coast. He didn't let us rest at all. So basically, don't let the players take the 10-minute rest. So they could still have the stamina pool, but they never get to replenish that. And then basically they end up, after a couple
that could be more challenging
encounters, then they're just living with their hit points, and that'll put them more on edge. So if they can't do a 10-minute rest, then they can't spend a resolve to do it, right? So if you just something interrupts their 10-minute rest, or you're in a hurry, or whatever's going on,
the next wave attacks, or if you wait, things are going to get worse at the location you are. To keep up the pressure. I will also, I feel like I ought to include a house rule, which is no favor to any of the players that I've heard, which is critical hits bypass your stamina.
Yes. Oh, I love that, Brett.
It goes right to your hit points, and it doesn't matter how much stamina you have.
We're stealing that, right, Brett?
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's
all right. Let's do it.
That's how we do this.
Thank you, Ron.
Yes,
you're
love that rule.
If you're down to 0 hit points, but you have
great.
stamina, then are you still dead then, or dying?
I think you're probably making death saves or something, right?
Because if it bypasses your stamina, so you go down to 0 hit points, but you still have stamina, what condition are you in then? That's still dying?
You're dying. That's the same thing that the game has If you took all your hit points
Poison or
from poison or radiation, which already bypass your stamina and go right for your hit points, it's that same situation.
Wow.
Do you two prefer the dying rules of Starfinder and Pathfinder 2 versus Pathfinder 1, for example, as far as bleeding to death? I mean, do you like the system of using resolve
Or negative con?
all that stuff?
I like second edition. I like the second edition.
The only thing that's really wonky about Pathfinder Second Edition is how it moves you around in the initiative order. Like as soon as you go down, you move in your initiative order to right before the person that knocked you down. That sometimes feels a little bit weird. But the fact that if you come back up, you've got the wounded condition, and that can knock you back down even worse. And if you get knocked down from a critical hit, your wounded condition is increased by 2 instead of 1. And where I've seen people die in Pathfinder Second Edition, which is kind of a lot, it's people think they're okay. They're like, okay, I'm only a little bit wounded. And then they take a critical hit or critically fail a saving throw, and then they're just knocked right into dying 4, and that's the end. You make up a new character. Although most of the people I play with, they don't. It's funny that you talk about the narrative possibilities of somebody's dead and how do we bring them back to life. Most of the players I know, they would take that as a relief. They'd be like, "Oh, my character's dead? Oh, because I got like 9 other character concepts in my mind, and now I get to play one of them again."
Back to balance again. I know in Starfinder, it's not recommended that certain level characters don't have certain level higher items right in their arsenal. Right? I guess to get a certain item, you want to be this certain level. How's that working? I mean, let's say, would it be really unbalanced if you had a second level character have a 8th level item?
Yeah, let's give context for that. So a lot of times, in movies or TV, you see somebody and they have this, gift from God. It's in the hero's journey, right? You get this gift, and that gift is usually pretty extreme. So it may just be a roll of the dice who gets that gift, or maybe somebody popped, So anyway, I like to play with powerful items, which is something I actually love about Pathfinder 1. I love the +5 items. We actually played with the +10 sword. I was a player in that, not a GM. And it came with the curse. Of course, if you died, you had to, anyway, it had a big, anyway. It's super fun to have these powerful items. What pitfalls do we avoid in our thinking here with Starfinder?
You give out high level items as you want, but avoid giving out high level armor. Because high-level armor is going to have so many bonuses to the character's KAC and EAC, then a lot of things just can't hurt them. And that's not fun. But giving somebody a high-level weapon where everybody else is shooting a weapon that does 1d8 damage and theirs does 4d8, I mean, that just feels cool, and it feels really tough.
It feels big.
The interesting thing about the weapons is they don't have modifiers to increase your likelihood to hit. So so you can give it to somebody who has a really low BAB, and they're still not going to hit anything. But if they manage to, it just does a massive amount of damage. So,
see, that's a really cool. You can picture that in cinema, right? That's just a cool scene. Like you got a level 2 person shooting at somebody at level 12 should have, and it's like boom, it connects finally.
Yeah, but I think other than weapons and armor, I mean, there's a lot of other items there that have a lot of really cool utility. For like vehicles to get around or being able to fly. Being able to have hover boots, that you can use, be able to become invisible. There's, lots of different upgrades and things that you could do that by themselves would allow somebody, if you get a first level character that now can become invisible, well, that's a really kind of a neat thing that they could do. It's not super overpowering, but maybe they normally had to be like 8th level to get something like that, though.
Yeah, some other questions I have. I don't have some of the newer source books. I guess since you guys expanded maybe with some of the newer classes, for example, like Biohacker, Vanguard, and Witchwarper. Are there other new classes too, by chance, or are those the additional 3?
Can I say precog?
Yes, go.
Precog in Galactic Magic. I'm playing a precog right now, and it's a delight. The core thing, the core shtick that the precog has is at the start of a day, they roll a couple of d20s and note down the rolls they get. And throughout the day, they can choose to swap in one of those rolls for something that they're going to do. They're like, I knew I was going to have to make this fortitude save back at the beginning of the day. And that's why I get a 19 on the die. Right. And then they've got some abilities that let them use that to reduce damage or, they can eventually get it to their initiative. So it's actually a really cool mechanic to have these sort of floating numbers that you can throw in. And some days your floating numbers are like a 3 and a 4. You're like, I am just not feeling it today.
Right, sure. Now, Ron, I'm not saying anybody cheats at Starfinder, but sometimes players, you're an honest Abe, so you're always tracking your rolls. what if somebody at the table is playing this character and may not be so trustworthy?
You have that with any role, though.
That's true. That's true.
You know, whether it's a pre-roll or an actual roll.
Well, we all got pixel dice, so we're going to fix all this.
Yes,
We're going to be able to see everybody's roll online or in person.
Yeah, there's also a nanosite. That's kind of a new one. There's a couple different flavors of that where you can, like we have one that's kind of a melee based, and so he can turn his body into different weapons and things. And so there's like a couple different flavors. I think with the nanosite, you know, that's a little bit more complex than the typical core classes. The Vanguard that Brett mentioned, I'm playing one high level. That's a lot of fun, but there's a lot of moving parts to it because it has a secondary pool that you draw from and do your special abilities with. So another thing to track. But at lower levels, you can pretty much just go in and beat on things, and it's not a big deal.
And for character sheets, do you recommend, like, for these complicated character builds and stuff? We always loved Hero Lab, especially for Pathfinder 1. Really loved it. And we jumped onto it with Starfinder in the beginning, and it worked. It did well. Would you use some kind of sheet like that? I mean, obviously, you guys know the rules, but if you were playing with, people who were kind of new to it, and you just needed them to know they weren't cheating themselves or cheating the table.
Right. Well, this is where I like Foundry, because when you drag it over the ability, you can just see it explains it right there, what it can do. When I use Roll20, and if I'm making a sheet for somebody, there's a page there where it has all the different abilities. I'll copy and paste the abilities in there. And if they want to see what it does or show people, they can actually click on it and it pops up in the chat and everybody can see, oh, they have this cool ability that does this thing. But that's a little bit more legwork for the GM on Roll20 than it is for Foundry.
Yeah, I love it when people can kind of control their own characters and best police themselves. I hate to be playing at a table where I feel like people are just like undermining it, you know. So hopefully we have a lot of people that are interested in developing their own characters.
Guys, I'm going to talk about Starship Battles.
Okay. Well, I think that's a whole other show. I think it's a whole other show.
It probably is.
We have the basics, and there's videos out for that. Are there any nuances that you're like, hey, look out for this, or watch out for that? Kind of like the overpowered armor gift. Is there something in a ship that you'd say, hey?
So there's a lot of stuff that was added with Starship Operations Manual, and you don't really need a lot of that, I'll say. But there's a lot of cool stuff that makes it more cinematic. There's errata from the core book, and I don't know if you know that. So all the DCs have been reduced with the errata, and that's really important at low level and very high level. The lower DCs make it playable. The higher DCs in the core rulebook make it near impossible for low level. And in fact, if I were wanting to have fun, I would completely skip Starship Combat, except to make it cinematic.
We kind of did. I mean, that was our experience a little bit too. And by the way, we just got done with Fantasy Flight Games, Star Wars, and I will say that because you can all die in a ship, you know, like if your ship blows up, you're done. So that would be a bad ending to a show, I would think. Anyway, it's pretty fun actually in space because everybody gets different assignments, and somebody can be repairing and somebody can be computing and piloting, and it's kind of fun as a team. And I felt when we played Starfinder, like maybe we were just too novice when we were playing it, but we just didn't get that. It didn't get that granular as a shit. It didn't feel like Firefly. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you kind of want it to feel like Firefly.
You can use it as a narrative device, right? If you're going to get, tractor beamed and boarded, that's just going to happen regardless. The thing that allows you to dispense with it, I think, is as long as you've got some sort of vehicle use, right? Whether you're, riding around on motorcycles or whatever. So the piloting skill maybe matters to somebody. All of the other things that people will do in Starship Combat to feel like they're in their role, they're going to do anyway. If somebody is if somebody's working as the engineer on the ship, all right, well, that just means they have good engineering, and they're going to be using that to, hack doors open, hack, computer systems and stuff like that. They're going to use the engineering. They're going to feel like an engineer anyway. The person who's in the gunnery position, they're going to be firing their weapons anyway. So I don't feel like Starship Combat is a necessary add to make people feel like they've invested in their characters. And that's one of the reasons I think from it, you can kind of do a narrative skip of it. You've got, to even the degree that, you've got you want to show that here's a bunch of drone fighters that are protecting the station or something. All right, well, you guys are, weaving in, just make a quick piloting check or something. Okay, you make it all the way through. And
Right.
I mean, you don't need to be afraid of putting them in a ship. But if you think of it as, like you might in Pathfinder being on a pirate ship or something, right? That's not unless you're getting real heavy into the vehicle rules, it's just going to be a vessel for the narrative. And you can do the same with starships.
Yeah, and in fact, that's how
I think it's great advice.
Yeah, some of the scenarios that want to avoid starship combat, they kind of make it more like a chase. And so you'll make a piloting check to avoid somebody. You might make an engineering check to boost your engines to get away faster. You might make a science check to be able to tweak something else. So you can have the players do something. Just the round by round of starship combat, because the math is really tight on both sides, takes a long time, and and nobody wants to be. I've seen them, especially with new players, go like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then they're done. It's like, okay, I guess that's how it works. If they're veterans, man, we can knock it out quick. It doesn't make it any more fun. We just get through it quicker.
That's good advice, Brett. We'll stay away from combat in space.
Yeah,
it's not a cinematic.
Good for
anyway.
narrative, like Ron was saying. Exactly.
Very cool. Here's the thing. So we're mostly homebrewed, and that is it's difficult to get our numbers with a homebrew unless you're Critical Role. It's really difficult to get good numbers because especially with Pathfinder products, because an audience will seek out like, oh, how do I run Mummy's Mask, and they'll watch that to learn how to play it, or maybe GM it, or maybe they're players and they're cheating. But so we were thinking about, for the first time, of running an AP. Which one would condense very nicely into a fun, real play show that was dramatic? We go like 13 episodes a season. I mean, our first season was 60 some episodes, and I was like, that's just way too much in post for me. So we've cut back to 13 to experiment with the audiences and then expand from there. If we get good traction with 13, we'll put another 13 out and keep doing that. So what AP speaks to you when you hear that?
I love all my children equally, but for different reasons. The thing I have to keep in mind is I think there's some fantastic options coming down the pipe. We were just doing some project planning. I can't say any of them, but they'd be awesome. Limiting to the ones that I can say. Some of them have a additional rules lift on top of them. If you've got new players, you might want to avoid. Horizons of the Vast, which is all about planetary exploration. It's got this whole charter subsystem in it that's really kind of rules dense. Fly Free or Die is all about kind of being Firefly, but it's got an extensive, how you do trade, how you pick up cargo and trade it to get more value and stuff like that. That is probably not for people who are sort of brand new. So apart from peeling away some of the ones that are probably not good choices, what do you think, John, as far as...
Well, given the time that you mentioned, I'm actually going to suggest something that's a little bit different than the adventure paths. And it's there's a standalone called Junker's Delight. It's about 8 hours of playtime. Starts at low level. They're a bunch of scrappers, So I think cinematically, I think you could do a lot with it that would cross, kind of what you might have saw with, Firefly, somewhat maybe you see in Star Wars and things like that in terms of the characters and the development. But it's about 8 hours. If we run it, it's 8 hours of playtime. And so knowing that when you're podcasting, you're going to add probably another 50% on top of that because of the role play and everything. So it's probably 12 hours. And if you're doing 1 hour sessions, that might get you 12. So
I love it.
So now if you want an AP, and I thought, Ron, you were going to go with this, the Against the Aeon Throne, I think is the one I would suggest.
Okay.
It's a 3-book. Each book playtime, typically, though, if you're running it straight through, is about 15 hours of playtime. So you'd have to condense each book to do it.
Yeah, or give yourself maybe just do the first adventure of Against the Aeon Throne. I mean, whose author is both intelligent and humble.
That's Ron. The Reach of the Empire. It looks awesome, by the way.
That's right. But that one, I really loved writing it because it's all about punching space Nazis, right? You go to this planet that's being sort of taken over by space Nazis, and you're running the resistance about trying to overthrow them. On its own, as part of the adventure path, overthrowing them then leads to more mystery. But on its own, it's a fairly satisfying, let's help out these locals with our scrappy team and, bust heads. And I feel like that's probably one of the most approachable sort of, if you've got somebody who hasn't played a lot of Starfinder before, they can get behind a lot of the tropes, from Star Wars, even Star Trek a little bit, but it's also it's a good feeling in that regard. It's also one if you want to crank up the lethality of it, like you were talking about. Part of the reason that makes a good one is if the space Nazis are killing off your characters, well, the other characters really want to get back at them.
That's right.
So it becomes a little more satisfying from a narrative perspective, I think.
If you were to make any of these into a TV series, which adventure would that be?
I would do Dawn of Flame except for book 4.
Ow.
Our crew will level up so much that I have to skip a book because it won't match the book.
There you go.
Ultimately, you can do that. So I got it. Cool.
The reason why I say book 4 is, and I was telling Ron this earlier today, it's really a side trek away from the main mission, and Ron can explain why that happens.
Yeah, if I were going to make one of them into a movie, it would be Devastation Arc, right? That's the one that's the super high level. It starts at 13th level and goes all the way up to 20th. And it's just got such high stakes and great visuals on stuff that's going on.
You see the full hero's journey from being a new person to being, you're starting them at already pretty powerful.
You could always do backstories.
I want the exactly. I want room because I'm creating the Starfinder cinematic universe, right? I want to have room for all the backstories of all of the great heroes that you meet. Right?
I'm looking at it right now. It looks awesome, and I that's one I have been wanting to read. Well, listen, you guys, this has been absolutely fantastic, mind blowing for me to get to talk to you two, and I've really enjoyed this. And I think, Brett, am I wrong by saying this? We have figured out a few things that we're going to do for the next show.
Absolutely. Cool. And we got a lot of great pearls from you too. Thank you, Ron.
Sweet.
And John.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
One last question. If a character does die, how are they getting back to life? Like, in your opinion, they're remote, they're on some, meteor or asteroid or something, and floating out in the what do you do with that character?
PFM.
Get back to Absalon Station?
Well, you can. There's actually a spell. There's a spell where you can retrieve the body. So it's just PFM.
What if we just give them to the corpse fleet and make them into undead?
Yes.
I see no reason not to do that.
Okay, Brett, we found our answer. That is the threat of this series. Very good. Well, thanks so much for the talk, and we'll see you guys.
Thanks so much.
Go on your computer and subscribe, and do comments and things.
Help us restore freedom to the galaxy. Seriously, press that button.
Press it.
So, are we saying if you press the subscribe button, you'll save the galaxy?
Do it.
It's true.
Do it, or the dark side will find you.